Salutations. I should like to think that I have learned a lot since making my earliest videos, and that my understanding of philosophical concepts has matured and expanded. As a natural consequence of this, I look back on my first videos and cringe with such intensity that I am scarcely capable of preventing my face from folding in on itself.
Can you live with yourself? What you've gone and done. Look at what you've gone and done here. For God's sake, you're a bunch of fucking degenerates.
Innumerable other issues aside, I left one of the most basic and important elements of classical philosophy vaguely defined and barely explored. A wonderfully presented video from a fellow Platonic YouTuber, link in the description, has inspired me to revisit the topic of forms and to clarify some points. Our problem begins with the fact that there are several different words with different meanings that are translated into English as form, or in ways that do nothing to explain their significance. On account of this, let us ascend from the lowest sphere through each of these entities to the highest, examining the nature and ontological function of each. The material form, which Aristotle calls morphe, takes up half of his doctrine of hylomorphism. This is an important aspect of scholastic philosophy, and has even been used by some to explain the presence of Christ in the Eucharist.
Jesus Christ!
The word morphe literally means shape, as in the geometric ratios constituting a solid body. For Aristotle, this also refers to its other mathematically determined properties, universals such as colour, extension, density, charge, and spin. Together, the set of these properties makes up the material form of an encosmic entity. It is these very things which make chairs, horses, men, bronze, and wood, where otherwise there would be undifferentiated fields or indeterminate, uncollapsed wave functions. In other words, pure potentiality with no actuality. And this should in fact come as no surprise if only one recalls that Heisenberg himself has situated the so-called elementary particles ontologically just in the middle between possibility and reality, and has pointed out that, as such, they are in fact reminiscent of Aristotelian potentiae. We need thus ask the crucial question, what is it then that actualizes these potentiae?
You know that's a loaded question.
Aristotle further differentiates between substance and accidents. Accidents are inconsequential to the identity of an object. For example, having a beard is accidental. Shaving does not change a man into someone else.
Wow, he's transforming into the exact same person.
Depending on who you ask, a man is either a rational animal or a featherless biped with broad flat nails, but while there may be some difficulty in identifying them, all are in agreement that there are substantial traits which render one creature a man and another a pigeon, slowworm, or Indracotherium, and further that there is a substantial difference between individuals such as Socrates and Alcibiades. The substance of an individual is called the primary substance, while the substance of a category is called a secondary substance.
Well, Gandalf is a type of golem.
You guys are lying now.
The aspects of the material form which appertain to substance are called the substantial form. A solid, a colour, a sound, a molecule can all be reduced to a set of ratios, which can in turn be instantiated in multiple ways. They can exist within particles, they can be drawn out with a pencil or carved into a block of stone, either as a shape or as a series of discrete numbers. They can even be sounded out on a musical scale. They can also be conceived entirely in the mind. Every form can exist in all of these modes at once, or without any of them, because the ratios themselves are none of these things. They are immaterial, existing in no particular place or time, but present simultaneously to all of their instances. Therefore, it is of the utmost importance that we allow no room for those idiotic caricatures of forms as ghostly object-shaped wireframes waiting to be filled in by the topiary of atomic matter, or as solid objects sitting in a parallel universe.
Ow! Watch it, Coney!
What Aristotle manifestly rejects was to these philosophers something quite different from the picture of forms that a close reading of all the evidence would show. So Aristotle, like Plato himself in several places, rejects an inadequate theory of forms, not the true Platonic theory. Be it substantial or accidental, the material form seems to be no other than a collection of distinct properties and the relations between them. The individual properties can manifest separately as parts of other material forms, so in what capacity can we call it a single thing? Is it an arbitrary label? Well, that can't be possible, since that would mean that the differentiation between two separate entities is ultimately arbitrary. There must be a unifying principle that contains the material form and all of its possible accidents. These are called logoi spermatikoi, usually translated as seminal reason principles. As an acorn contains the latent possibilities which unfold into an oak, each logos contains the latent properties which an entity can assume. This allows for the possibility of growth, change, and development within nature, despite the seeds of this growth being self-contained. One logos does not account for distinct and differing individuals. One human being does not suffice as the exemplar for many, distinct each from the other not merely in material constituents but by innumerable variations of ideal type. This is no question of various pictures or images reproducing an original Socrates. The beings produced differ so greatly as to demand distinct logoi. Rather than a ship of Theseus, each substance can be imagined as a branching path of unfolding possibilities like an evolutionary tree. Child and adult, bearded and shaven, alive and dead, based and cringe, all are seminally present in the logos spermatikos awaiting instantiation. Hang on a tic-tac time increment. If logoi are the paradigms of unique entities, and material forms are the formal cause of physical objects, then what in Claude's name was Plato talking about when he mentions forms of species and categories? None of this sounds anything like the way you talk about Platonic forms at all. Ah, so you haven't forgotten my horrible early videos. Well, now we have come to the eidoi, or those entities by means of which a multitude obtain a common identity. These are not universals in the same way that properties are, but are instead the paradigmatic causes of genera. Thus, there is no eidos of redness, or of spaghetti, or of hands, or of Socrates. There is an eidos, for example, of man, if man is taken in the sense of a rational animal. Since material forms are within the generated cosmos, they partly fight against one another and partly blend together, while ideas, eidoi, being under the good itself, are directly within the best and they neither blend together nor oppose one another. At this point, we must also make the distinction between that which is participated in and that which is unparticipated. Since it is impossible for a participant to perfectly receive a form, and forms cannot be exhausted by their presence in their participants, it is impossible for even an infinite number of participants to entirely capture a given form, falling infinitesimally short like Achilles chasing the tortoise. The hyparxis or summit of each hypostasis always remains entirely transcendent and unparticipated. This results in a dichotomy between the participated aspect of each form, which is in a sense multiplied between its participants, and the corresponding unparticipated aspect, which is monadic and singular.
And now you know my cool backstory?
That is pretty cool.
Thank you.
While the existence of the forms is posited for its explanatory power, we must not make the mistake of viewing the relationship between the form and its participants as a teleological one. By this I mean imagining the form exists for the purpose of causing the participants. The form is not there for the sake of the objects, but is a self-contained entity in itself. No form is different from the intellect, but is itself an intellect. What we call the form of man is not a man, otherwise it would require another form of man to explain its commonality with other men. The form of man is something entirely different from a human creature, but which has qualities which cause other qualities in men. In the same way, a written description of a crocodile is not a crocodile. One is a rectangular piece of paper with ink on it, the other is a semi-aquatic archosaur, but the crocodile's appearance determines the words used to describe it.
Crikey, he's as fat as mud.
And thus the features of the written description are dependent on the features of the crocodile.
Wow, what a little beauty. Oh!
It is the multiple causal chains, serai, descending from each henad, which not only differentiate the intelligible essences themselves from the one being, but also individuate them in order to produce the subsequent logoi spermatikoi and the multitudinous material forms. Thus we have a consistent progression from total unity to total multiplicity through each hypostasis, via intermediate states. It is for this reason that different patterns, shapes, colours, chemical compounds and so forth are associated with different gods, because they lie inside their respective chains. These are called synthemata of the gods, and they are the primary mechanism used in theurgy. When multiple gods share a synthematon, it is because their chains coincide, either patristically or conjugally. Thus, all things are full of gods. Things on earth are full of heavenly gods. Things in heaven are full of super-celestials, and each chain continues abounding up to its final members. For what is in the one before all makes its appearance in all, in which are also communications between souls set beneath one god or another. Thus, consider the multitude of solar animals, such as lions and cocks, which also share in the divine, following their own order. I hope this video has lent some clarity to the issue of forms. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.